Story 1. Born dead on my 16th birthday, just after I had blown out the candles on a fairy cake. My mother told me that I was born dead. "I'm so happy that you made it," she said. I pulled the fork out of my mouth. "What, oh," she said. "I guess we never told you. If not for Aunt Kira, you wouldn't even have made it through your first day." Aunt Kira, Nurse Kira. My mother's contractions started in her lunch break 2 months early. She was at the hospital 20 minutes later, and another hour after that. She pushed my head out of her body. Like most babies, I didn't breathe. The doctor gave me a light slap, like for all babies. Another light slap, like for some babies, then a stronger slap. At that point, my mother started screaming. A thick stream of blood ran out of her lower body. The doctor handed me over to a young nurse who tried another slap and then quickly passed me on to a 24-year-old nurse, Nurse Kira. Kira wrapped her mouth around mine and blew air into my nose. She used 2 of her fingers to quickly massage my chest. She paused, blew another gust of air into my lungs, and kept massaging over and over again. My mother stopped screaming. They managed to stop her bleeding too. They told Nurse Kira to stop the CPR. They said it as hopeless. The doctor tried to pull her hand away from my small and still chest. When that didn't succeed, he declared me dead. 2 days after my 16th birthday, I met Kira again. To me, she had always been Aunt Kira, never Nurse Kira. "The world just disappeared," she said. "It was like there was only you and me, and my whole life seemed to have led to that moment." She took a bite of the fairy cake and smiled. "It's strange, but I don't even remember moving my fingers or giving you mouth to mouth. I just wanted to save you, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not even my own life. I just knew you would live, even when everyone told you to stop." Kira nodded. "Even then, I knew that you would live, and I would have do anything just to make you take that first breath. Thank you. It's okay. I'm happy that I did. Make sure you bring good to the world." 3 days after my 16th birthday, I announced to my parents that I would become a nurse by the time I turned 17. They had convinced me to become a doctor instead. Studying medicine was the most difficult time of my life, or at least the most difficult time. I remember, before I gave them a tour of the grounds, my parents had never even entered a lecture hall. They had supported me in school, but university was different, and when I trouble with deadlines and tax of learn this by heart sheets started, they didn't know how to help. Aunt Kira did know. She came and showed me the best books. She taught me mnemonics for the most important bones and muscles. She even taught me how to take proper notes and where to sit in the lecture hall. Not in the first 2 or 3 rows so you don't get picked on, but in the first third of hall. The ones in the back, Kira said, are either shy or don't want to listen. As a doctor, you shouldn't be shy, and as a smart girl, you should want to listen. It's not cool to sit in the back. It's the seats of those that want to chat and gossip or sleep. It's the seats of those that want to fail, and it's not cool to fail. I would be lying if I said my grades were great. Boo. I never failed an exam, and my grades were high enough that when my first placement went well, they allowed me to join the neonatology specialization. It felt like the right thing to do, the right thing to give back. When I graduated, I had 3 parents to watch my hat fly. There were my parents, of course, and Aunt Kira sat to the left of my mom with a big smile on her face. Kira also helped me get my first job, and her hospital, in the hospital in which I was born dead. She showed me the way around and introduced me to the other nurses. Aunt Kira told me how to learn the most and how to handle those wrinkly, small, and fragile humans with care. But she also scolded me with her soft voice whenever I handled a newborn too roughly or made decisions that she thought were not ideal. Used for 1 year I had that pleasure. I wish I would have thanked her more often. The doctor's life is hard. You have to be calm and compassionate to your patients all day. And life doesn't allow you to take rest and think of yourself. But most of all, it doesn't give you time to sit back and see all the other people in your life that would need your compassion. I knew that her husband had died long ago, but Aunt Kira never wore a sad face. I also heard the rumors, but with my thoughts on the patients, I quickly discarded those words from my mental stack. Unhappy, miscarried, lonely, can't have children, always just at work. I always asked her how she was, and she always said she was fine. A whole year, and I didn't. Listen. She was standing behind me while I was giving advice to a soon-to-be mother. I felt her hand on my shoulder, and then she pulled it away, and we even offer a water birth if The patient turned white. Oh my God, the patient said. Oh my God, a what? Left my mouth. But before she could answer, I heard the heavy thud behind me. Aunt Kira's arms and legs were twitching, then cramped. Her lower jaw was pulled down and her eyes turned inside. Seizure. We gave her muscle relaxants, but her mouth never closed again. Kira was in at bed for a week. There were so many flowers that even the second table didn't suffice. There were always people in her room, holding her hand and saying kind words. Only when I said that I was a doctor and needed privacy, then they would leave and I would sit down and cry with my head on her chest. When she felt her head had hit the floor, an aneurysm, brain dead. I hadn't paid attention to that hand on my shoulder, to that hand laying on my coat. After a week, her doctor made the decision to pull the plug. Please don't, I said. He looked at her face. I'm sorry, he said, but you know she's dead already. That afternoon my parents came. Kira's sister and her two nephews, too. One after the other, a slow procession of nurses and doctors went through the room to squeeze her hand or kiss her forehead, all except my parents. And her sister and nephews left. I was the one that pulled the plug. There is no sound like that steady, long beat. No sound where you hoped so much that it would sound different. A week later, I emptied her locker. Another nurse, one around Kira's age, came into the room while I was folding a blue sweater. The nurse looked around the room, then quickly approached. Emmy, she held a file towards me. It had Kira's name on it and a patient number. We shouldn't give this out, she said. But I think you might want it. Why, you will see. That night, with a basket of Kira's possessions on a chair and a glass of sour white wine on the table, I opened that file. There were not many pages of the first years, just her profile and insurance data, a few standard tests. I felt a stone in my stomach when I saw the pregnancy test positive. There were several more lab results, an admission sheet. One word was scribbled in red letters at the top of the page. Miscarriage. My training took over. I looked through the data on the page and didn't find a cause. For nearly half an hour I read through the sheet and the lab results stable. D to the yellow cardboard. All results seemed fine. She had been admitted in the afternoon with pain and bleeding, but there didn't seem to be a cause. There was an operation report too. They removed her uterus. I sank the file on the table and felt tears roll down my cheeks. I had never listened. I had never wondered why she was alone. That's why she had always cared for me so much. She had saved me. She had given life to me. I had been her replacement child. I took the glass and raised it. I would have done anything just to make you take that first breath, she had said. Thank you, I whispered. It was in that moment when my eyes were somewhere on the ceiling and the cold of the glass touched my lips. The page had turned back to the page with the red letters at the top. My eyes moved back to the page. I looked at the large scribbled word with the capital M. My eyes moved down the page. Then I saw the date, my birthday, ... story 2. Moths. The first thing Jenny noticed about the new house wasn't the jacuzzi or the wrap-around porch or even her new room. It was the moths. The first one flew out the door when they unlocked the house for the first time. It wasn't a big deal, and the family had even had a good laugh about it. But then she started seeing more of them, nestled in the corners and drawers, even in the old pots and pans left by the previous owner. She hated moths to her. They were just ugly, dusty butterflies, but nobody else seemed to mind. At first, Jenny, though that nobody else was really bothered by moths. They were everywhere. They were in her room, and that's what really upset her. But the most moths were in the living room. Every time she flipped the light on or walked into that room, she swore she could hear the rustling of hundreds of gray wings folding, trying to hide from her. She was surprised anybody would even sit in there. But they did, and they cooked with the pots, and he ignored the 2 moths flying around the ceiling fan at dinner. There are a lot of moths here, Jenny stated, picking dully at her food. Suppose so, her brother said, stuffing the cooked chicken into his mouth. She looked away, disgusted. Is it the light? I mean, maybe it's the light that's attracting them. We could turn on the porch lights at night to try and draw them out. Or maybe it's the smell that... Jenny was cut off mid-sentence. Jenny, come down. There are hardly any moths. You're just overreacting, her father said, cutting his food. I haven't noticed any, her mother said, slowly sipping her soup. Since she had gotten sick, she hadn't spoken much. She was looking better today, it seemed like, or perhaps it was just the lighting. Jenny remained silent, eyeing the moths above her head. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. It seemed whenever she closed her eyes, the moths started moving. They hid from her, of course. They knew she would swat them if she saw them. But when her eyes were closed, they moved. She put in her earphones and tried to block out the noise. It took her an hour, but she finally fell asleep. Her dreams were gloomy and confusing, and she didn't remember them in the morning. But the words screamed in her dream were still in the back of her mind, the moths. She awoke to the sun peeking through her window. She sighed and covered her head with her covers. An eruption of wings came from her bed, flying up past her face. She screamed, realizing the moths were only on her bed, but also in her bed. She jumped out and ran into the hallway, panting. Her brother stumbled out of his room, wide eyes glazed over. doubly what he asked. Looking around, she could only stare as 3 moths climbed slowly through his doorway onto the ceiling. She covered her mouth as another moth crawled over her brother's foot. He didn't even notice. "There are moths everywhere," she screamed. "How do you not see them?" He sighed. "You're such a drama queen," he mumbled, going back into his room. Jenny stayed, staring at her knob and door back against the wooden railing. For a while, she couldn't go back in there. She couldn't. It had been like this for a week already. No more. She went downstairs for breakfast. Still in her pajamas, her father looked up at her in mild surprise. "Aren't people usually dressed by 8:30? He asked, returning to his toast. "Yeah, funny thing about that. I was awake this morning at 6 o'clock, and I was woken up by moths. Dad, in my room, in my bed," Jenny complained, still shaking off the memories. "So that was you screaming your head off this morning?" he asked, looking up at her with a slightly angry expression. Have you even listened to me, Dad?" "Moths everywhere, up on the ceiling, in the furniture." "Yes, I was screaming because there were 20 moths in my bed," she exclaimed furiously. How could he not see what was crawling over his breakfast plate? She shrieked and picked up the newspaper, smashing the moth on the table. Her father jumped back, almost knocking his coffee over. "Listen, Jenny, I know you're upset about the move and all, but this is ridiculous." "Okay, yes, 1 moth. But you woke your mom and I up last night, and she wasn't able to get back to sleep. You know how important sleep is for her, don't you? Now, I think you should go into the living room and apologize to her," her father said sternly. Jenny was dumbfounded. Did he not notice, or did he just hate her? She knew there was no point in arguing. When the mom is sick card is pulled, you may as well fold, because there's no way you'll win. She straightened up and spoo in on her heel, heading to the living room. Her mother was sitting on the large brown sofa, eating more soup. Jenny grimaced as the moths nestled farther into the safe cushions. "Hey, Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. It's just the moths." Jenny tried to explain, already feeling bad for what she had done. "You know what, Jenny?" Mom demanded in a hostile tone. "I've had just about enough of the moths. I haven't seen any. They're not bothering anyone, but you just have to keep pushing and pushing for attention. You think this move hasn't been hard on all of us? I'm the one dying." "Jennifer," her mom stared at her with a coldness she had never seen before. Jenny backed up. Her mother had never been cruel. Even when she was diagnosed, she took it in stride. Her eyes darted up as a moth grasped into the ceiling fan slowly dropped down. It landed in her mother's soup bowl. Her mother, still looking directly at her, spooned the struggling moth into her mouth. There was a small crunch, and then nothing. Jenny grasped the wall behind her and ran to the front hallway. She didn't know where she was going. Just anywhere but here. She ended up beside a river. She didn't know which one. She had just run until she was gasping for breath. Then she had walked. And eventually, after about an hour, the path she had been following faded away onto a river bank. She sat where the sand and grass met, slowly tugging pieces of grass up. Something was wrong. Her brother, an alert, determined boy, had been so sleepy lately. A moth could crawl the length of his body, and he wouldn't even know. Her father, a quiet, studious man, was angry and harsh. And her mother, her sweet, sickly mother, she was cruel. She rested her hands in the grass and sighed, tears pricking her eyes. What was happening? She felt tiny legs crawl over her index finger and pulled her hand up quickly. A small gray shape fluttered up. She screamed and ran. There was no place to run but home. The walk home took longer than the run did. By the time she was back, it was around lunchtime. She saw the car was gone from the front of the house. They must have gone someplace without her. She sighed again and looked down. She felt guilty and angry and upset, but most of all, she felt confused. At this point, everyone had abandoned her friends, her family, but not the moths. She made her way to the back door. Luckily, it was unlocked. She let herself in and made herself a sandwich, not paying any attention to the moths. After finishing, she went back to her room and fell asleep. Hours passed by. The car returned, but nobody woke her up or checked on her. When she opened her eyes, it was dark. She didn't sit up or even move. She knew the moths were there. What did it matter? There were moths on her ceiling. Maybe one would fall in her mouth. Maybe it would land in her eye. She didn't care. The moths above her moved slowly, forming a shape. No, a letter, a word. The moths had lined up to shape a crude word. Jenny. Her eyes widened. Sure, nobody cared about her, and she had nobody left to Helion, but moths could spell. They rearranged themselves. 3 words, an order. We need Jenny. A shape moved in the corner. Jenny's eyes quickly shot to the object. At first, it looked like a mass of moths moving together in a cloud. But then she saw it. 2 eyes, red, staring at her. At first she thought she imagined it, but it grew closer. It was in the shape of a man, but with wings. His body was covered with a short gray fur. She should be scared. She should be screaming. But something about this was calming, like this was meant to happen. He reached out an arm to her. The moths above her now read, "Go." She sat up, the moths flying up around her, dispersing from her covers, and she took his hand. It was warm, yet cool at the same time. The fur was rough, and small claws protruded from his fingertips. His did not hurt her, though. He needed her as did the moths. The moths needed a queen. Story 3. One isolated incident. My fingers are still trembling. I have no idea what I should do now. How long has it been? Maybe an hour and a half. All I know is I can't set foot in that apartment again. I'm typing this from the library. I have no else from which to tell this story right now. I've been living in that apartment for 9 years now, by myself. There is a lot of stuff in there that I would hate to leave behind, but it may not be my choice anymore. Let me back up for a second. I suffer from chronic sleep apnea. For those who don't know, sleep apnea is a condition in which you stop breathing periodically throughout the night. Sometimes you go without oxygen for so long that your brain has to wake you up intermittently to force you to start breathing again. It is a deadly condition, or so I've been told, but I've been reluctant to see a doctor about it. What I wouldn't give for a doctor right about now. Last week, my curiosity got the better of me. I was well aware that my snoring was bad, so bad in fact that my friends with whom I had been rooming at a hotel a few months back had to wake me up because they thought that I was dying. I decided then that maybe if I set up a camera and tried recording this so, under my own snoring, the shock of hearing said sound might be enough to make me want to see a doctor. Little did I know just what a shock awaited me. After the first night of recording, I woke up, bleary-eyed as usual, stumbled over to the camera and ejected the tape. I went about my usual morning routine of spreading butter over my soon-to-be microwaved frozen pancakes. The tape finished rewinding A-B. It sooner than I had expected, so over the microwave buzzing, I proceeded to press the play button. It was going to take some time to get to the point on the tape where I actually fell asleep after consciously pressing record on the camera the night before, so I punched the fast-forward button. There was no need to watch the TV, as there would be nothing worth seeing. It was more the sound I was concerned about than anything. The usual bars of distorted static danced across the screen in such a way that would soon be unrecognizable to a generation growing up in an age where VCRs were all but extinct. In between the distorted bars, though, I could still make out the black silhouette of my body lying in the bed against the dark orange backdrop of the wall, which was slightly illuminated by a street lamp outside. I went about pulling the pancakes out of the microwave and set them on the counter with one hand, with Mrs. Butterworth's ready to fire in the other hand. That's when it caught my eye. On the television, my silhouette was sitting up in the bed. Mrs. Butterworth crashed to the floor, dispersing her contents onto my feet. Before I even knew what was happening, I hurriedly rushed to clean up the mess and get to the remote as quickly as I could. I punched the rewind button back to about a minute before the point at what hour. My silhouette sat up in the bed. I shuddered at the thought of what I was about to hear. I turned the volume up on my television and listened closely, having completely forgotten about my breakfast. Already there was the usual sawing of logs, as my mother used to call it, accompanied by a few nasal snorts and what almost sounded like belching. In actuality, the sound was my swollen uvula resisting as I gasped for air. It was definitely worse than I had realized, but I was still waiting for that moment. I'm not sure why I flinched when it happened. I knew it was coming. Yet still, I had no memory of having done it. I told myself, you don't always remember what you do in your sleep. You are hardly even aware of it. The snoring subsided a little bit, no doubt because I had to have been regaining some slight consciousness, but the true shock had yet to come. The silhouette spoke. Can you hear me? The voice was unrecognizable to me. It was a low, gravelly voice that told a tale of cigarettes by the thousands. I haven't smoked for 5 years. I could only imagine how bad things would have gotten if I had kept on. The silhouette spoke again with more urgency. Can you hear me? Was I dreaming? To whom was I speaking? My ability to recollect the events of dreams had fallen by the wayside in recent years. There was little reason to believe this was going to make any sense. I see you listening. Answer me. I know it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Surely he wasn't speaking to me, his future self. I had I've been having some kind of delusions in my sleep. That had to be it. There was no other explanation, I thought to myself. Oh, there's an explanation, all right, he responded with that. The sound, if the mattress shifting would be heard. He was turning to get out of the bed. I stopped the tape. I didn't record anything for the next 2 weeks, nor did I manage to make time for the doctor, I threw myself into work. I stayed busy. I even managed to make it out to the gym a few times. I watched my eating more closely. I erased the tape. By the 10th or 11th day, I had almost gotten to the point as making it through an entire day without even so much as thinking about it. By the time 2 weeks had passed, life was pretty much right back to normal. Unfortunately, as memories tend to pass, so the emotions associated with them, and as my fear slowly dissipated, curiosity crept its way back in. I thought maybe the one night had just been an anomaly. Maybe I had just gotten up to go to the bathroom. That's probably what woke me up to begin with. I had concocted all sorts of excuses and theories as to what might have really happened that night. So for the second time, I set up the camera, pressed record, and with surprisingly little trouble, fell into another wondrous sleep. I arose the next morning and was quickly spurred to action, but not by invigoration. It was more so the sight of my camera, which was lying on its side on the floor. The entire tripod was tipped over. Another overnight bathroom break, perhaps. Whatever it was, I was anxious to find out. With pancakes and toast syrup already added, I sat down, a little apprehensive, but content that I had reasonably figured out what had happened last time. I reached the beginning of the tape and started to fast forward through the first few minutes of me actually getting to sleep. The familiar dancing static bars and my silhouette against the dark orange wall scrolled in vertigo-like stacked balls on a slot machine. I heard a bloop on my computer nearby and rolled over to give it a look. It was an instant message from my friend John about an upcoming get-together. I formulated a quick reply and cut the first pancake with my fork. Just as I was putting that first piece into my mouth, I glanced over at the television. My face was covering the entire screen, half obscured by the darkness. My eyes were wide open, teeth bared, a look of pure inhumane terror. My hands fidgeted at 100 miles an hour as I struggled to press the play button on the remote. The sound was almost as inhuman as the look on my face. I couldn't tell whether I was laughing or in excruciating pain. The sound was much like that often heard by zombies in video games or on certain more popular television shows. I could hear every flap of the uvula as my other self growled at the camera. The growl slowly started to turn into words. At first it sounded like "help me," and then it changed to "I'm coming for you. I'm coming." I was frozen in my seat. I couldn't move. I was petrified. Just then I heard a loud clunking from the bedroom behind me. At this point I sprung into action, but I couldn't even tell you now that it was I who was doing what I was doing. I wasn't acting on any logical sense of any kind. It was pure gut instinct. I opened the door to my bedroom just in time to see a completely covered lump in my mattress, about the same size as me. Suddenly, the covers flung wide open, but I could only just barely see it happen as I shut the door and ran past my still growling face on the TV screen, bare feet and all, straight out to my car. All I know is it's a good thing I keep my keys in my car. Otherwise I'd be out there running somewhere with no shoes. I'm surprised they haven't thrown me out of this library already. I only have about 10 minutes left on this computer and about $45 in these pants. With any luck, I can make it out to my sister's place in Eau Claire. If anyone happens to see this, these are the events exactly as I recall them. I pray this is not the start of a pandemic, but merely one isolated incident. Store. Why for? Not all secrets are taken to the grave. I've always found it particularly difficult to start a story. It's easy to end one, but ever since grade school, when my teachers would make me write a short story, I could never make a good start. I suppose I'll start by saying this is a story about my best friend. He died about 2 years ago. He was in his living room, watching TV, and he had a heart attack, and boom, just like that he's dead, gone, bye-bye, see you later. It was really shocking when I found out he was a hard-working man who was a mechanic. He always was sweating from physical labor. It didn't make any sense how he could have possibly died from a blocked artery. But I guess some things aren't always what they seem in this life. We went to his funeral. It was a simple service. Family and friends of his showed up. We said a few words about him. We cried and all the usual stuff at a funeral. Then we put him in the GR, and we left. I got over his death okay. I was sad for quite a while, but I knew that he wouldn't want me to sit there sad all the time. Stop being a wuss and get on with your life. He'd say he was just that kind of guy, a tough, skinny guy with a mouth full of lemon juice. His name was Tom. You could see him from miles around, walking around with his big ego flaunting high himself round like his **T didn't stink. Hilariously enough, it usually didn't. As you can guess by that joke, we were real close. As kids we were inseparable. We'd spend our nights and days causing trouble around our small town, ding-dong ditching and throwing eggs at random old ladies and such. We grew up, and I got married to a beautiful wife. He stayed single, preferring to be a one-night stand kind of guy. He even made me a special promise a long time ago. "Percy," he said, "if either one of us goes off to the big yonder bee, for the other, the one that goes should come back and tell the other what it's like up there in heaven." I wasn't too thrilled with the idea. "But I wouldn't want you to come back. I want to find out for myself what the light is," he grunted in annoyance. "Ooh, fine. I still want one of us to come back, though." He scratched his nose in thought. "But only if we have something really, really important to tell the other person, like if they're going to be in an accident or something." We agreed and shook on it. It was a promise I know he couldn't keep, but for a while I really wish he could. As I said, though, I moved on with my life. He did, however, keep his promise. At sunset on a summer day, I sat in my living room, like I usually did, with my gorgeous wife cooking dinner in the kitchen. I had just finished an episode of Seinfeld and was lazily looking out my window at the oranges and dark pinks the sun was making on the clouds. Suddenly, I got a knock on my door. It was slow and quiet, and if I wasn't paying attention, I would have thought it was a tree branch hitting the side of the house due to the wind. Knock, plain as day. After about 4 knocks I go, tee up from my chair and yelled, "I'm coming," at the door. As walked toward it, something didn't feel right. Like I shouldn't open the door. Like if I did, harm would befall me. I ignored my feelings and went up to it and turned the knob. No one was there. Great. It was probably the damn neighbor kids. I stepped outside cautiously, looking for any sign of the little intruders I was, shocked out of my mind when I saw him standing there. It was my friend, albeit not at all like he was when he was alive, but it was definitely him. He stood there, one leg shorter and the other, still wearing the suit he was buried in. His suit was torn and caked with dirt and moss. It was faded and smeared with stains of various body fluids. As for his body itself, it was literally skin and bones. His skin was no longer tanned from hours out in the sun, but now it was gray, dry, and cracked. It covered his bones and looked like someone had outlined them with sandpaper, and parts were curled up like cinnamon, revealing the red and white of his aged bones. The contours of his body were distorted like he had been molded out of wax, and his face was a shadow of what it was originally. It was a skull. The hair wisps of thin string and tangles of matted mud and old pieces of wood shavings. His ears and nose had decayed away, revealing morbid holes that looked like caves. His mouth was exposed, his lips long since parted, showing off his teeth and tongue. Entire parts of his lower set were completely gone, and I could see the divots where the teeth's roots had once been, but the eyes were the worst part. They had only partially decomposed, the water having seeped out long ago, but his irises and the white stayed behind each eye. Looking like a deflated beach ball, the pupils stared blankly at me as if they could steal my soul at any moment. I stood there in absolute shock and fear, completely paralyzed. He spoke, breaking the silence. "You didn't think I could do it, did you?" His voice was weak and raspy like a smoker's, and yet, even with him being so far away, it was as if he was speaking right in my ear. When he opened his mouth, what should have been his tongue was replaced by a gob of black goo that squeezed out of his mouth, flowed down his neck, soaking what remained of his white undershirt. I breathed out heavily, still looking at him, and said, "That isn't possible. You're supposed to be in your grave. I know you're afraid," he said, "but it really is me. We need to talk. Can I come inside?" I stepped aside and pointed my arms towards the door. He walked up slowly, his short leg dragging his long leg behind him. His arms swung around him. He struggled to breathe, his breath long, and wheezing. I opened the door, resisting the urge to throw up as I got the first whiff of his odor. It wasn't exactly like rotten meat, but more of a mold and dead rat smell mixed with a household cleaner. It burned my throat when I breathed it in. He went in and fell upon my couch. My wife called from the kitchen. "Hun, who's at the—" "Nobody," I said, quick, cutting her off. "Just an old friend." "Okay, dear," she said, returning to her work. I turned and walked back into the living room where Tom was waiting. Well, I've been dying to see you," he said. He burst out in laughter at his pun. His laugh sounded like an old man choking on cotton. I looked at him unhappily. "Why are you here, Tom? Funny you should ask. You remember our agreement, Don, to you? Well, I'm keeping it." "Yes, I can see that, but how did I come back?" "Well, it's simple, really. If you want something bad enough, you'll get it." He turned towards the door and sighed. "It's time I tell you the news now. What I've come here to warn you about." I tapped my foot impatiently. "Well, what is it?" He began to speak, but then he paused for a moment. He looked at me, his prune eyes glinting. His eyes began to glare, and felt a great, malevolent force emanating from him. "You know Percy?" I've been real lonely in that coffin. It's cold, the bugs crawl all over you, and it's boring lying there all the time. I've been hoping for company, someone to lie with. I felt extremely uncomfortable at that moment. Tom, I have to live my life. I'll go. When I go, for now I need to stay here with my wife. No, I'm aware of that. That's the thing I'm going to warn you about. You see, I won't be lonely for long. I stew. They're in confusion. What you mean? It's your wife, Percy. She isn't happy. Do you know what she's doing right now? No, I said, looking at him concerned. She has a pistol, Percy. She is planning to kill you with it, then collect the insurance money. How dare you? I said accusatively. It's true. Percy, she would never do that. Fine. Don't trust your friend, but don't say I didn't warn you. He got up from the couch, pieces of his hair falling on the floor, clumps of mud joined them. He went to the door and opened it. He turned around before leaving. See you soon, he croaked, ENT out, and slammed the door. I sat down angrily on my recliner. I sat there and thought a while about what he said. How could he say such a thing? My wife, the woman I had been married to for 15 years, kill me? Impossible. I looked up and saw my wife come out from the kitchen. She stopped and smiled at me. Then she drew out a gun from her pocket and cocked her head. Percy, dear, dinner's ready. Story 5. The deer of possibilities. As I lay in the grass, the warm summer breeze rolling over me, I can't help but wonder what I did to deserve what had befallen me. I never really hurt anyone, never kicked any puppies or anything like that. But hey, I'm just getting ahead of myself. In order for this to make sense, we have to start this story from the beginning. It was the beginning of May, and the weather had finally cleared and dried up a little. I was on my way home from work when a sign for a local petting zoo caught my eye. It was called Fondo Rosa, a family-owned place where you can walk around, pet and feed deer as well as see other furry animals. The little bored with my life at the time, I decided I would stop in and support the place, feed and pet a few animals, then head home. As I entered the fenced-in area, I walked to the far end of a huge pond towards a small, younger-looking buck. As I approached, it turned to look at me and hurriedly walked over to get some food from me, or so I thought. I reached out to offer him a carrot. He tilted his head, his dark eyes staring straight into my soul. We stood stock still for a good minute before it spoke. Causes Emmy to jump in surprise. Hello, Neil. It spoke in a voice very similar to Morgan Freeman. You're a very special person, and I know will help me. I can't ask this of just anyone. I really need your help and have a favor to ask of you. You can talk, I stammered. Yes, I'm a talking deer. But all that aside, I just need a small, easy favor. I'll make it worth your while and reward you, even. How can you, a deer, reward me, a human? You going to give me lettuce? I chuckled. All you have to do is make a sign saying found lost dog with your cell phone number on it. Then post it up outside the main office. That would be lying. I don't have anyone's dog. I already know you will do it, Neil. Less ask a, more do a, it demanded, waving him away with its hoof. Long story short, I did what it asked. Later that night, I got a phone call asking what the dog I found had looked like. Ironically, I had found a dog outside my apartment complex no an hour earlier, and described him to the owner. Turns out they were a very wealthy family and gave me a $20,000 reward for finding and taking care of their championship purebred. The next day I went back to the zoo and the magical unicorn deer was waiting for me. "Let me be the first to congratulate you on your reward," he began to introduce myself. "My name is Deer. I see what will be and what can be. As you can tell, me being a deer makes doing things I want done hard and are impossible for me to handle. So from time to time I have been known to seek out special people such as yourself to do these simple tasks for me, and in doing so receiving a reward for your actions. This is too good to be true," I grumbled, shaking my head. "I want you to know I will never lie to you or make you do anything illegal. At times the things you do may lead to something bad happening to someone else, but ultimately it will be balanced out with something good happening to you. At first the thought of bad stuff happening to others deterred me, but nothing good ever seemed to happen to me. So why not switch things up a little? What's an IT for you?" I asked. "From the tasks you will accomplish I will be able to construct a masterpiece, one that will make my existence worthwhile," he answered with a creepy, toothy grin. "You have yourself a deal, dear," I said with a sigh. The next few months went by fast, especially with keeping busy doing the tasks the deer wanted. I had done around 20 or so tasks, learning a little bit about Deer's history along the way. He had actually been a famous palm reader and jester thousands of years back. A joke of his, however, went terribly wrong. When one of the princes he was entertaining got offended and had him executed, his spirit lived on through the ages, reaching out to whoever would listen. To be honest, I was happier than I had ever been those past few months than I had been in my entire life. I had money, women, a good job, and a great place to live. Everything was going good till now. This morning I was told to put a semi-driver on a shift just a little longer than usual. I did what I was asked, and in doing so a co-worker of mine that originally would have given a coupon for a free meal and visit at Fondo Rosa gave the coupon to me. So I took a longer lunch break and headed out to the petting zoo for lunch. I brought my lunch over to Deer and we shared my meal in silence. I had gotten up to leave when Deer spoke. "I'm afraid our time together is running short. As I said before, I see what will be and what can be. What goes around comes back around," he finished singing the Justin Timberlake song. "Wait, what do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Why, my masterpiece, of course," Deer chuckled. "Everything you have done for me has led to this exact moment, starting with the poster and ending with the shift change, Washington. What's going to happen?" I asked, starting to freak out and debating on whether to hightail it or not. "There is no use in running," Deer stated bluntly. "As I said before, I have been planning this moment for a few months now. I knew without a doubt you would help. To humor you a bit, I will tell you how it all plays out, because no matter what you do, my masterpiece will be complete. It all started with the dog you found, which allowed for him to be returned home. The next task, the one with the quarter, caused a child to jam a toy machine. He got upset, and his mom got so worked up she had a heart attack, so they had to call in someone to take over her dog watching job for the day. The substitute watcher being the man you told he sucks at life, he got upset and was very distracted at work today and accidentally lost the dog he was supposed to be taking care of. Then I had you go to a bar and move a beer a few inches, which caused someone to spill it on another person. The one guy got mad, throwing a beer bottle at the other guy, which hit a baseball trophy case, causing it to shatter. You tried to help the bartender find the missing ball, but she got so smitten by you she completely forgot about the missing ball. Well, a kid found that ball and is playing baseball with it as we speak. Then the shift you changed today, he was already working a double shift. Now he is really exhausted and his reaction time is a little slow. Deer let out a loud sneeze and turned to look across the road. But what does this have to do with me? I scared, dreading to hear the answer. He just nodded towards the road. I slowly turned to face the road as I heard a kid crying and chasing a dog with a baseball in its mouth. The kid stopped to catch his breath as the dog entered the road. Then, turning to face the kid to see if he was still following, he playfully crouched and wagged his tail. I jumped as a semi blared his horn. Too little too late. He dog exploded into bits and pieces on the fender of the truck's cabin. That's when the ball caught my eye. It bounced into the wheel well of the rear tire, then without warning came rocketing towards me. I covered my head and chest with my arms, hoping to protect myself, but the ball wasn't after my face or chest. Clocking easily at well over 100 miles per hour, the ball hit me directly in the ball sack. I immediately fell to the floor, gagging and puking all over the place. All the while, Deer was prancing around, laughing hysterically. "Get Shrek, scrub," he howled. Your face is so priceless, ah ha ha ha. Best prank ever." Looking around frantically, I found a rather large rock by the pond, sneaking up behind Deer and raising it over my head while he asti lines laughed uncontrollably. He whipped around as he caught sight of my shadow looming over him. "Oh shit," he gasped, as I brought the large stone upon his head, killing him instantly. I sigh, heavily hobbling over to my car and driving straight to the hospital. A few hours later, surprise, surprise, I found out I am no longer able to bear children. With my testicles swollen to the size of tennis balls, I couldn't help but shake my head in disgust. I lay down in the grass, swearing to myself, "Looks like the deer would have the last laugh." Story 6, the campus tour. I can't prove that this is true. No one I've told believes me, and I'm really just tired of telling the story and getting into the inevitable debates over plausibility. But I know what happened and figured the community here may at least have more of an open mind about the experience. If anything, I can at least get the whole story written out without being ridiculed. It was about 1.5 years ago I started attending college. After filling out mountains of applications and jumping through nonsensical hoops, I finally received notice about where I had been accepted. My first choice, UGA, had actually accepted me, which was great, but another college accepted me as well, Kennesaw State University. Now, this school was notably less prestigious than Tech, but was still one of the largest in Georgia. However, I had never even toured the place. I just sent the app out, going through the motions. So I decided I should at least give the place a fair chance, and promptly decided to VI through the campus before making a final decision. The day was rainy, and the grounds of the university were riddled with mud and soaked patches of freshly planted grass. There were only a few of us in the tour group, since it was getting close to the fall registration deadline, and the tour ended early due to the light rainfall increasing to a thunderous downpour. Not exactly pleased with the inaudible view of the campus, I opted to explore on my own. Luckily, I had a backup poncho in my car I donned before walking around and checking out the place. Thunder crackled above me, and the rain increased, as if determined to stop me from proceeding, but I pressed on, exploring more of the campus. As I journeyed through the buildings of the small campus, I realized all the buildings I had gotten to were closed down. It seemed odd. After all, it was still summer. Shouldn't classes be going on? And on that note, the student body seemed non-existent. That wasn't such a big deal. After all, it was a disastrous storm. But still, I hadn't seen a single soul since the tour group broke up. Eventually, I made my way to one of the dorm areas, named University Place. It was a small grouping of dorms that resembled apartments, though they were far off from the main campus, as if hidden away. I quickly found shelter under an overhang to briefly get out of the weather. A poncho is only so useful when it gets torrential, and that's when I noticed that a door to one of the dorms was open. Just wide open. I walked past it, trying not to be too obvious, but I glanced in. No one was home, though I could see a TV alongside the wall was lit up. Normally, I wouldn't try and intrude, but I was determined to at least get to see some part of the campus more in depth. I walked to the door and knocked on the wall inside, yelling to see if anyone was inside. No answer. I knocked again, this time taking a step inside as I did. Still, no answer. I decided it wouldn't hurt to at least take a look around the living room, so I headed inside, removing the poncho and leaving it at the doorway and slipping my drenched shoes off as well. I called out a final time as I walked into the main living area. To no avail. I looked over at the TV, which was stuck on static. No noise, though. I walked over and turned it off, noticing that the place seemed vacant, but with signs of life. An open pizza box with food still inside was on a table in the living room, though it was inhabited by flies, seemingly left alone for days. As I walked through the room, I noticed a smell waft into my nose that was incredibly displeasing. It smelled like rotting meat. Part of me told me to get out, but the other part was insisting I keep walking. I crept towards the smell, realizing it was coming from the kitchen. I slowly approached, the smell becoming more poignant as I got closer. I reached the sink and found just that, rotting meat, infested with maggots, writhing in the chunk of beef. It was disgusting and disturbing. I nearly vomited from the sight and smell, quickly turning around and leaving the kitchen, only to realize TV was back on. Maybe it was some odd setting on the TV that made it turn back on. At this point, I was getting pretty creeped out. I turned the TV off again and even unplugged it from the wall. I decided it was a good time to leave and started towards the still open doorway. That's when I heard it, a thump. I nearly jumped at the noise, but tried to keep my composure. It came from the room near the doorway, labeled A now. I've seen enough horror movies to know that you don't go towards the nose. You run away from the noise, so that's what I did. I went straight towards the door and grabbed my poncho, ready to leave. Suddenly, the door flew closed right in front of me, slamming itself shut against the door frame. I nearly fell over from the surprising motion and quickly shuffled backwards. I stared in awe. Trying to figure out what had happened, I lurched forward and tried to twist the knob to no avail. It was as if the door was locked from the other side. I pounded on it and cried out, yelling for help, frantically twisting the knob as hard as I could. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone to call for someone, only to see that no bars were available. Fantastic. Eventually, I gave up, looking around the room for any other way out. I soon realized that the actual dorm rooms had windows in them, which I could maybe use to escape. I could practically feel my heart pounding in my chest as I came to the realization that something was really going wrong here. Was it a joke gone wrong? Was someone deliberately trying to freak me out? If so, it was working. And then I heard another thump, louder this time, still coming from that room. As much as I didn't want to approach it, that room seemed like it could have someone in it, which would be my best bet at getting the hell out. I got up and advanced towards the door and quickly realized the TV was on again. The static was lighting up the screen. Even though the TV was unplugged, still, I ignored it. My only concern was getting out at this point. I knocked on the door once, then waited. No answer. I knocked again. No answer. I called out. Nothing. I gripped the knob and turned it, feeling the door give as I pushed it open slowly. The room was dark, and the outside weather made it impossible to see anything more than the vague outlines of the furniture, a bed and a desk, with some knickknacks here and there. I called out, trying to figure out if someone was there. With no answer, I flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. I crept into the room towards the window. It was my ticket at escaping, and I thought about nothing else. Until the covers on the bed rustled, I jumped back against the wall. Hello, I called out. Nothing. Are you okay? I asked what I presumed to be the dorm inhabitant. Again, nothing. I reached towards the bed and gripped the cover, ready to pull it off. Slowly, I dragged the bedding off the figure and stepped over to the uncovered being. What I saw made me gag and stifle vomit. It was a man not much older than me, with his eyes and mouth sewn and shut. Dried blood caked around both orifices. He was naked and had some sort of odd symbol cut into his chest, more blood surrounding it. I stared at him, still unsure about what I was seeing, and then his head turned, twisting towards me. He let out a small moan, which made my blood run cold and created a powerful sense of fear within me. I quickly threw off the sheets and ran to the window. I unhinged the locks and pulled up on it as hard as I could, a metallic screeching accompanying its movement. Cold breeze shot in from outside. I didn't care. I was getting out. I forced the window open, the outside rain flying in as I did, and I began to climb out into the world. I tumbled into a bush outside and quickly got up, looking back to make sure that thing wasn't following me. Oddly enough, there was nothing in the bed now. It was vacant. But I didn't care. I ran and kept running. I got to my car, got in, and drove away. I always have nightmares about that experience. I have no ideas about what happened, and I don't want to think about it any more than that. All I know is I'm never going back there. In fact, I swore off college completely after that. It sounds stupid, but it was an experience I'll never be able to shake off. I thought I would feel some relief typing it out and getting it out in the open. But after going through that, it didn't help at all. It still scares the hell out of me. Story 7. The summer I was 18 and saved. I lived in a town full of potheads and low-income housing. My parents made $20K a year combined, and we were the richest people in the village. I spent most of my time in the theater program and playing Dungeons and Dragons in the cafeteria until the janitors kicked us out. But the summer that I was 18, I was a month away from being a counselor at a camp, 2 months away from attending college, 7 states away from all I'd ever known. And so, the summer I was 18, we were kicking stones behind a building that had seen 3 restaurants in my brief lifespan, none of which were very successful. The last one, we had been 15, and it tried to market itself as an organic farm-to-table kitchen. But considering the average lunch of most people in my town was PBJ on bread from the food pantry, it didn't last much more than 6 months. Someone broke a window. About a week after it closed, Maggie tried to crawl through said window to take a photo for her abandoned chic Instagram one time. She sliced her leg open, and we had to call an ambulance. The photo was a pretty nice aesthetic, though. Half-erased curling, chalk font advertising blueberry pancakes. Even the paramedic agreed, though she advised us not to trespass again. No, we weren't bad kids, but nevertheless we found ourselves behind this building time and time again, glancing in to see the dried blood smear inside that still testified of Maggie's art. I think Grayson was smoking own thing that I hated, but of course it was perfectly legal now, and at least he put his cigarette out before he sat with us on that park bench. But it was Grayson that brought up Rachel. We hadn't seen her much since we walked out of that high school auditorium with papers in our hands. We'd spent that night together, still being good kids, but celebrating our graduation with Orange Crush and a bonfire. Grayson and Dean had some weed, I think, but the rest of us just threw sticks into the fire and talked. Rachel was quiet that night, just sitting on the canvas chair and scrolling through her phone. She kept waving us away when we asked if she was okay. When the sun really went down, though, it got way too cold for the girls who wore skirts, and Dean, who wore shorts to graduate. I am like some sort of scumbag, so I ducked into the house to grab some extra sweatpants to distribute. I was determined to make Dean wear my fluffy pajama bottoms. With the sheep, Rachel came with me, and I remember she just broke down. I didn't know what to do. I was just a dumb kid with an armful of fuzzy pajama bottoms. And when she started crying, I just dropped them. I put an arm arrow under her shoulder, and she sat on my bed, and we stayed there for too long. She sobbed into my favorite Star Wars hoodie, and I rubbed her back. She didn't speak, just cried for the longest time, and when she finally spoke, it was apologetic. I'm sorry. Next month I leave this all behind. I'll be better. What happens next month? College. No, she shook her head, the curls from graduation already starting to fall out from their pinned prisons. I'm not doing college anymore. I'm getting help. And I just didn't know what to say I had been the last one to get help. I'd been stuck in such a rut the last half of junior year, and finally I let loose to a school counselor. I'd been writing in a journal and generally had my depression pretty much under control since and except for every few months we stayed there for longer, quiet except for the muffled sound of music we didn't really listen to coming from Ronnie's speaker. She left the party after that. I don't know where Rachel is, Grayson had said. The fact that Grayson had brought up Rachel meant he had something new, or at least that's what I hoped. She changed her number sometime during the summer. My messages had stopped being delivered. The way he phrased it, it should have clued me in, but my brain was still clogged with memories of muffled bass and bitter tears. Isn't she in the hospital? She's not, though. Well, did you call her parents? Amber asked, then her hand curled in Mohammed's. Her parents are dead, Amber. We all half laughed then because that couldn't be possible. We all knew her parents, and Grayson was probably high or something. But then he pulled out his phone. No one's at their house. No one's answering. He phoned, and look, I took a walk through the cemetery down on Main Street. Margaret and Peter Stevenson. Death dates 3 months ago. That's not funny, Grayson, Maggie said then. You find some tombstone generator online. I wouldn't make this up. Look, it'll take us 15 minutes to get there if you don't believe me. And he was right, because of course he was. It was us, dark out. But by the light of Ronnie's cell phone light we could make out the words, black marble and carved crosses, just like the photo. And in the light, we spotted her. Rachel, thanks for bringing tea. Grayson, and we all looked to him, and Ronnie swung his phone light around, and he looked like he wanted to run, like he was fighting back an urge to vomit. And when he turned the light back to Rachel, there were others, hooded figures in burgundy. There must have been 30 or 40 of them, and they didn't make a sound. They just stood there, waiting. Who the hell are you? Amber shouted. What the hell do you want, my friends? Rachel said then in a voice that wasn't her own. And then I caught it, the posture, the way she moved. It was like she was broken, like a puppet that was being held together by strings. Maggie swore behind me as she approached, lifting a hand to Grayson. Silently, we shuffled away from him. I'm sorry I had to do this to you, Grayson apologized, and it took me a minute to realize he was even talking to us, because he kept his face pointed towards Rachel and the strange burgundy robes. What did you do? Dean demanded. We keep things right in this town. We keep the evil from entering it. We keep the souls from leaving it, the souls we want to save. What are you talking about? The saved, they make us forget. Grayson's voice had picked up to a frenzied half-scream. But the saved protect us, too, from what is out there. We need to become them, so we can know, and to become them, they must feed. We didn't have much time to consider that, or whether Grayson had meant to say more. Rachel, this thing that was not Rachel, that was broken and put together at the wrong angles. It inked its jaw like a snake, the joints popping and straining, and then it bit down on Grayson's neck. Hoods were lowered, and then there were many Rachels, many others who we recognized from graduating years past, who had never come back to the town, but we figured that they had settled out west or stayed at school, and we never thought of them, and I booked it. That night I ran like hell. I pushed past Maggie. I grabbed that awful lanyard she wore around her neck with her car keys and her cards, the one that so proudly proclaimed she would attend Cornell in the fall. I thought she would follow, I guess, but she fell, and in that moment my survival was more important. I stole her keys, I stole her car. I drove it to the bus stop. I used her card because her pen was the same as her lock screen, and I got out of there. My parents are still looking for me, I guess. But I know the police are looking for me too, because they're pretty convinced I killed my friends the summer that I was 17. My friend Crease bought 2 hedgehogs, and I know what you're thinking, that this couldn't possibly be the point of this story, but just hear me out. Crease couldn't keep the hedgehogs until he moved into his apartment, but he bought the hedgehogs a month before that, so I watched them for that month. Anyway, the female hedgehog, it turns out, was pregnant. Apparently the past owner had kept her with a male hedgehog. She gave birth to 3 little squeaky babies that looked like a chicken with grains of rice for spikes. I covered her cage and refilled her water and researched how best to care for these little nuggets. That evening, she was hissing and spitting as she ate them whole.